Here we are at the General Convention of the Episcopal Church meeting in 2024 in Louisville, Kentucky. And I'm sitting with Vincent Dixon of Stand with the Rocky Christians. And the presenting question, Vincent, is what is your mission story? What would you like to share with us about how God has worked with you in mission?
Okay, well, maybe the best place is to start how I discovered Stand with the Rocky Christians. I'm from Radnor in Pennsylvania, and Chris Bishop, who was director of at the time the director of St. Martin's Church, had one Christmas around 2017 when his parishioners asked him, "Do you know what's happening to the Christians in Iraq?" And he was like, "I don't." And Chris went to Iraq and he discovered that there's a Christian community that's been there since the time of the apostles. And ISIS had invaded the Nineveh Plains, which is that part of Iraq and northern Iraq. And they had all been forced into refugee camps in Kurdistan, which is not very far away, but they were forced out of their homes in less than 24 hours. And this is a place where they've lived for 2,000 years. Chris came to speak at our church, and he said, "These are the last Christians on earth who speak Aramaic, which is the language of Christ." And I was hooked. I was hooked by their history. I'd imagine, I hadn't known myself, I hadn't known there were Christians in Iraq. And when I heard there was Christians in Iraq, I presumed, the English had been there and they probably converted a couple of the locals. But no, there were Christians in Iraq before there were Christians in my country, Ireland. There were Christians in Iraq before there were Christians in England. They were there. When I was there, I stayed in a monastery, the monastery of St. Matthew or Marmati. It was built, there's walls in that monastery that were built 100 years before St. Patrick came to Ireland. So that's their history. At the beginning of the 20th century, there were 20 million Christians in Iraq.
20 million?
Yes.
Whoa.
And they'd been there for, 2,000 years.
Yes.
At the beginning of the 21st century, there were 2 million. Today, there are less than 200,000. So that's the numbers. And our commitment with Stand with Iraqi Christians is to support them staying and thriving in their homeland. Because what a disaster would be if some of the last Christians on earth who still worship in the language of Jesus were no longer to have that culture. Like when Jesus said on the cross, Abba, he was speaking in Aramaic. When Jesus preached, he preached in Aramaic. And that community in northern Iraq and Syria are our last direct linguistic link to the language of our Savior. So this for me is touching, it's important. I've been there. I went there twice. And, it's the other thing is when you go, I'd imagine that Christians in Iraq would be hiding or they would. No, you go to the Christian quarter of Erbil in Kurdistan, and there are churches everywhere. I see more Christian paraphernalia churches than you'd see around the Vatican. And they proudly show their Christianity. And a lot of the Christians moved from the Nineveh Plains to Erbil when ISIS came, and they've stayed there. So they've built 3 new churches there in the last 5 years. And these are mega churches. These are not small churches. These are big. There's an Armenian church, there's a Chaldean church, and there's a Syrian church. There are new churches with, hundreds of people there on Sabbath.
And so you're working with Christians of all of these different groupings.
Yes. We're supporting and their communities. So, for example, the main thing we've done, we listen. Their first question is, has the Western Church forgotten about us? And I would have said, no, we didn't. We didn't know you existed. It wasn't even we've forgotten about you. We didn't know you were there. And so we listened to them. Their first concern was, can we, when they went back to Karakosh, which is the main Christian town on the Nineveh Plains, their farms they were mainly farmers. It's an agricultural region. Their farms had literally been destroyed by ISIS. So we would give sustainable grants so that they could rebuild their farms. And we've supported about 75 families rebuild their businesses, whether they're small businesses or farms. And each one of those supports, we reckon, on average, 10 to 15 people. So that's, those are livelihoods. One grant is sustainable. We follow up, and we really keep good data about the sustainability of the farms. And now we're working on a big it was a terrible tragedy. This community, they had ISIS. They come back. There was a wedding about 2 years ago at a church in Carrickbashan. There was a fire there, and over 100 people were killed. So they've had, a lot of trauma. So our big project, we call it our strategic project this year, is to build a community center where they can come together as a community, where they can get support, where they can get development training, and that's because this is what they told us they want. And I'm touched by their faith.
Yeah, how has it affected you? What is your experience of God in the midst of this mission outreach that you're involved in?
I have great faith in God. I know no matter how bad things look on the ground, God works. God is. I am, and I'm touched by the first thing I'm touched by, like I was saying to you, is their profession of faith. The churches are full. They're full on the Sabbath. The second thing is I love the beauty of the diversity of their churches. I was in one church and the Syrian church, they close a curtain during parts of the ceremony. And I was asking, what's the curtain about? And I was like, well, wasn't there a curtain in the temple? And then being to services held in Aramaic, which are probably the closest services that exist today to what would have been experienced by the early Christians. The oldest synagogue and the oldest existing church and archaeological remains in the world are from this part of the world. We have if it hadn't been for the rise of Islam and the invasion of Islam in the 7th century, Iraq would have been a center of Christianity. It would have been a major center of Christianity. It's Babylon is southern Iraq, and Assyria is northern Iraq. But the Jews went to exile in Babylon, and then they went to exile in Assyria. So it's tied into our Old Testament.
Yes.
Abraham came from Ur in Chaldea in southern Iraq. The birth, the first of the patriarchs came from southern Iraq. So our whole Judeo-Christian faith started where these Christians live is between the Tigris and the Euphrates, or as we would say, the Garden of Eden. So this is, in the beginning, this is the cradle of civilization. And there have been Christians there since the time of the apostles. And our commitment is for them to be there for another 2,000 years. So I'm touched by their faith. I'm touched by their generosity. I'm touched by the beauty of their services. There's something special about being in a service that's got a tradition that goes back almost 2,000 years.
You make me want to go.
We're looking forward to going together.
That would be great.
Together.
That would be great. Well, thank you so much, Vincent.
Thank you.
It's been a blessing.
God bless you.
God bless you. And God bless the work of Stand with the Rock Christians.
And I want to say what your support of our mission is so important to us. The support of GEM in supporting us being seen in the broader Episcopal network is just so important for everything we're doing.
Well, and so much of what you're doing is the heart of what Christian mission is. It's not so much helping people as being with people.
Yes.
Which is a ministry of solidarity, standing with. And I just love the title of your organization, Stand with Iraqi Christians. Whatever else you do, you're standing with them. You're sharing the journey. You're sharing the suffering. You're standing with them.
And the joy.
Yes, and the joy.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much, and God bless you.
Thank you, you too. God bless these things.